Okay, what I have here is the Blue Book of Cincinnati, 1957, by Jane Finneran. And this is a really, really interesting book. And I'm more inclined to put it in a class of ephemera because of the subject matter, rather than describe it as a book. Now, I know people that collect ephemera would say they might be inclined to say, well, it's a book. It's too substantial to be considered ephemera. But I think of it more in that vein because of the subject matter. My notes on this: Blue Book of Cincinnati, 1957 edition by Jane Finneran, and I think it's really interesting Cincinnati historical ephemera. The table of contents, it opens with debutantes from 1953 to 1956. It lists all the debutantes. And the next section is a description of abbreviations that are used throughout the volume. The next section is the alphabetical listings of all of the people that rate being in the Blue Book of Cincinnati. This is where the abbreviations become important to get all the information in there. A lot of abbreviations are used with the people they're talking about, so you can take up a lot less space if people understand already the abbreviations that are being used. So very interesting design and thought process there, and very, very efficient. And of course, if you were using this book, you would automatically know what the very abbreviations meant. And the entries include the husband, the wife, juniors, which would be any children, and it includes the colleges that they went to. There's a lot of Harvards in here, a lot of Yales, Sorbonne. This is the upper crust of Cincinnati. These are very well educated people. And the last section is a Miss to Mrs., which I thought was really interesting and a really good idea. I mean, for its time, this was very well thought out, very well laid out. The Miss to Mrs. section is referencing girls who have married and are now young women. And so you can look up their maiden name. You can look up who you knew them as a girl, and it will reference you to their married name, and you can look up the address information and whatnot that way. So a very interesting cross-reference of girls that have married and become women. My notes on this for condition: dust jacket. A most unusual dust jacket. The dust jacket is almost as interesting as the book itself to me. It is present and intact, but condition is poor. Fascinating nonetheless. As you might have guessed, I have rated the condition of the dust jacket as poor. But despite its looks, it is stable. I suspect that the deterioration of the dust jacket has been from various times when it's been moved, probably from household to household. It hasn't been wrapped properly or handled with care, and it's deteriorated. Every time it's been moved somewhere, it's deteriorated a little bit more. But the dust jacket right now, today, is really quite stable, and for its condition, surprisingly so. Is it fragile? Yes. but surprisingly stable for its condition. I've seen a lot heavier dust jackets than this, and condition worse than this, that were ready to turn to dust. This is not like that. My notes include, it is a textured, vertically striped, ivory light brown jacket. And the aging makes it difficult to determine what the original color was. I want to guess it was probably an ivory, light ivory color, and it's darker now. The tan and light brown look is probably aging. It's hard for me to really be sure how much to attribute to aging versus my guess at what the original color was. You can see in the video some of the texture and some of the change in texture between the vertical stripes. This dust jacket is very, very thin. This dust jacket is like rice paper thin. I'm amazed that it exists at all. It's one of the it's maybe the thinnest dust jacket that I've ever seen. I'm not sure what the material is. It's not paper exactly. It doesn't have quite the feel of paper. It's not quite plastic. It's not plastic, but plastics were coming on big. Was there some percentage of plastic in this at the time? It just has the feel and look of it. I just have a hard time saying this dust jacket is purely paper. I want to say there's some plastic content. I don't know. I'm not knowledgeable enough about this kind of cover to say. But it's nevertheless, I think this dust jacket is really interesting. My notes include thin as rice paper, feel of silk. There is a slight transfer of blue color from the front cover to the inside of the jacket. It's very slight, but if you take it off, it can be seen. A little bit of the blue has transferred to the inside of the dust jacket. And the dust jacket is almost translucent. It's a really interesting dust jacket. And I'm going to take the dust jacket off now and show it so that I can show the book separately. So bear with me here. So I do want to be careful about it. Okay, so here we have, I'm going to try and show the texture as best I can. The vertical striping, you can definitely see the vertical striping. You can see how the texture and color change between the striping. Here's the inside of the jacket. And you can just see, and I'm not going to point it out because I don't have enough hands to be careful. You can just see a little bit of transfer. If you didn't know there's a little bit of transfer from the cover to the inside of the dust jacket, you wouldn't even know. But this book is really interesting, And so I've been looking it over been looking it over very carefully. This book also falls in the class of one of those where I have it for sale, but if it doesn't sell, I'm not going to mind one bit keeping it on the shelf. It's just really interesting. The cover, my notes on the cover. The cover is like new to my eye. It is a bright, bright blue. There's brand new books that don't have the brightness of this blue. It's really pretty. Text and decoration are stamped in a very subtle blue-green. So we've got the lettering is the Blue Book of Cincinnati, 1957 edition, and we have some vertical decoration. It's showing up quite well on the video here. Just to look at it, it's much more subtle just to look at it. It's actually showing up very well on the video here, more so than if you're holding it in your hand and looking at it. It's not this prominent at all. It's much more subtle. My notes also include the cover is not quite hardcover. It's so nice, it seemed at first to be strictly a hardcover. It's cloth-covered boards, but my suspicion is if it wasn't so nice, if it wasn't so unhandled and unread, this might be more described as a limp cover. And it's not. There are different kinds of limp covers. So it's hard. It's kind of in between. It's not really a hardcover to me, but it's certainly not a paperback. So if this had been handled, if this had been read, if this had seen some handling, this would almost be, for me, a limp cover. Probably it was a hardcover, but it just, for me, it has that feel of a limp cover. Although it's so crisp, it's just like a hardback. So my notes say could be better described as limp binding, though it's really not quite that. For the text block, pages are clean and bright. This is a cool book. Cover and pages have rounded corners, which is a very nice touch. The video is not really picking up the rounded. It's picking up a little better because you can see they're not square corners. So the cover and pages have rounded corners, which is always a nice touch. I like books that have rounded covers rather than simply square covers. So that's the extent of my notes. So let me just show the book a little more. Got that bright blue. The spine is in very good condition. This book was not handled hardly at all. Hardly at all. I can tell just from looking at the cover. I can tell from looking at the pages. And I can certainly tell from looking at the spine. It's not broken. It's not creased. It's not worn. This book has not been spread out on the dining room table and flattened out, or whatever room they would have kept this book in. So the pages are nice and bright, crisp, no marking, clean throughout. Really interesting piece of Cincinnati ephemera. And that's about all I can say about this one. This should give you a very good feeling of what it is.